Hi, good morning, Wolfgang, on your side, and it's an afternoon here in India. So we have Wolfgang Goebl, who is been an enterprise architect in a lot of companies previously. He's president of the Intersection Group. He's a co-author of Enterprise Design Patterns, 35 different design patterns, which tells you how to business design, architect your enterprise, and create a lot of goal congruence and organization alignment within companies. And he also started the Architecture Thinking Association, and he's been the president of the same for a couple of years. And he's authored a book, and he's based out of Vienna, Austria. So we are here today to hear about his interesting journey on what has taken him uh, on his journey, and his frustration with a lot of frameworks that were there in the market, and how he chanced upon to write a book to solve that whole problem, and then talk about his journey on what it does it really mean to have an architecture mindset, and how do you do business design really well, and all of those sort of stuff. So we have Wolfgang here. Good morning, Wolfgang. Please share and walk us through your journey on how it has been over the last couple of years. You've traversed. It's been a long journey in IT that you've had, and you have traversed down the hat of an enterprise architect in many companies. You've been a lead enterprise architect. You've done business design, and you know pretty much all the facets that are involved from concept to cash. So please walk us through your journey, how it was, and what led you to take this unique journey that you have
Okay.
currently undertaken.
First of all, thanks for inviting me and good afternoon to India. I'm happy to be here. Um, I think a journey as an enterprise architect can be quite bumpy. So I started it in 2006 in Austria's largest bank. Um, and we started with opening TOGAF and having a look at the books that are there. And it took us several years to reduce the methodology to the core. So one of the first finding was that the current literature and the current bodies of knowledge for me offer only quite the limited advice. So starting as an enterprise architect can be really tough. Because I'm not really satisfied with the bodies of knowledge that are out there. And then I've been doing it for 6 or 7 years in this Austrian biggest bank. And in the 6 or 7 years, we took the existing prevalent frameworks. Archimate started at this time, for example, and tailored it towards our needs. So what we did, we took the 900 pages of TOGAF and maybe the 30 elements of Archimate and hundreds of relations and tailored and make it simpler and simpler. And at the end, it took us, I would say, 5 years until we had a methodology that was simple and simple to use as an iPhone. And for me, this was one of the key findings. It does that you typically it's a lot of work to find your enterprise architecture approach, and you're there when it's simple, much simpler than what's out there. So, and we were quite successful at the Austrian largest bank. That's true. And after that, I applied it in, I would say, 8 or 9 other companies as an external consultant, rather. So I took the knowledge from what we learned there and applied it to various industries, so railways, transportation, energy, and financial industry, and all the industries. And there are patterns. So we believe that there are patterns and that enterprise architecture, at least the body of knowledge, can be simple. And we are in some surroundings, I was successful, I would say, yes, but I would say in 70% of my projects, I was not successful. And when I talk to all to colleagues of mine that have been around also in the field of enterprise architecture, there's a lot of frustration going on. So when you talk to those people, they say, well, these days everything must be so quick and time to market is everything and innovation. So when I go to the boardroom and say, please give me 20 million bucks for a legacy renovation or for a sound redesign of the architecture, you don't have a chance to compete with people that are first and go to the board and say, I need some money for the next blockchain prototype or innovation, time to market. So that's really a challenge how to tackle this sustainability long-term issue. We need to deal with as enterprise architects when you compete with other more time to market aspects. So that's a challenge. And for that reason, I must be honest, I think I was successful only in maybe 20% of the surroundings. So the methods, I always applied the same methodology. So that means the methodology is not that bad we used, but it highly depends on the context. And there are some contexts where it is best to just leave, yeah, because there are contexts where you don't win anything with enterprise architecture. Yeah, and 2 years ago, I founded Architectural Thinking Association, and what I did there basically was I wrote all the knowledge I created in these 12 years or 13 years of enterprise architecture in a Confluence wiki. It's still up there in architecturalthinking.com. So the method is there, described by a single person, and it's simple and simple as an iPhone. But I, I I wanted to publish it as a book. That was the first idea. Yeah, but then my potential publisher told me, "Yeah, you can do that, but you probably sell several hundreds. Maybe you can sell 300 books. Yeah, so that's not a lot of an impact." And I said, "Okay, the only chance to make it work is to make it a community project and to found an association that is the legal body behind the toolkit." And for that reason, I founded in August 2018, 2 years ago, I founded Architectural Thinking Association. And we now have a growing community and we have 50 advising members and we have discussions that are interdisciplinary because enterprise architecture is interdisciplinary by nature. So we have organizational designers now, we have user experience designers, service designers, process managers, as well as software architects and people that design microservices. So what we want to do, we want to shift in the idea of architecture from the IT space. So that's where it emerged, yeah, Zachman and so. It's business architecture, Bespoke, for example, that's more IT than business. Still, there's a lot of IT mindset and engineering mindset in there. And so I think the vision we have with architectural thinking is to open the concept of architecture to a broad audience. We must open it and make it available for the business side because architecture is about elements and relations, right? And you, as an engineer, you learn how to deal with those systems and their interactions. So the elements and relations and how do they work together and how to compose them. And one of my most exciting experiences I made was a point where people at a railroad company started to architect their capabilities, for example, or their information entities. So we believe with architectural thinking that's the mission is that it is possible and we must open the concept and bring it to the business side and make them accountable for the architecture. I think it's a huge problem that business blames IT for the weak architectures and everything is slow and expensive and we have totally out of control IT application landscapes and it's easy for people to blame others for that disaster. Yeah, but the idea is to shift this accountability to where it belongs, where the money is. So the people who invest the money must also be accountable for their decisions. And if you decide to make a mess, then you get a mess. And and with architectural thinking, we had the idea just to position architecture to the business side.
Okay, okay. So what was your pain points, Wolfgang, with regard to the existing frameworks? I read that, you said UX doesn't talk to business designers, don't talk to UX guys don't talk to, there's no service management concept in an enterprise architecture. Typically, people don't, because that's also coming as an upcoming game-changing operating model, changing kind of an entity, which people don't consider except for the ones whose official title is that of a service designer, that kind of stuff. So, what was your pain points mainly with regard to these frameworks that, as you said, TOGAF, Archimate, and a couple of others that you've encountered? So, what were your main pain points that you see that the alignment wasn't like, it was not meeting the reality and so on? So, what were
Yeah,
they?
I would say that the TOGAF and Archimate is enterprise architecture frameworks or tools, modeling notation for enterprise architects. And we must be aware that we are a tiny community. And so I would say these bodies of knowledge are good for enterprise architects. So for this tiny community, but enterprise architecture should be done by everybody. So it's a collaborative task rather than a discipline. And with those frameworks, 900 pages and so many elements, it's not possible to connect architecture to the business side. So an executive will never read TOGAF, of course. That's not what it's made for. And yeah, that's the one thing. And the second thing is you don't get much of practical advice there. So at the end, you can read and you have a certain idea that you have these phases in the ADM, for example, that you should do business and information systems architecture. I'm fine with that, but no one tells you how to do it exactly. So I think there's a lack of practical what we call design patterns. So how do you model a capability map? How do you set up a governance structure in a certain context? There's only some ideas in these bodies of knowledge, but how to do it exactly. And that's the reason why we founded this association, because we want to elicit the wisdom, elicit the ideas out of our amazing community. And we really have really good names now to come up with patterns. And I'm only happy when in our toolkit, for example, capability map will be quite prominent there. I'm not happy just to say, yes, you should do a capability model, but I want to offer advice on how to do it. What is a good capability model? What patterns do we need? And that's a lot of work, and but that's where the wisdom lies. And so we think that with our toolkit that will be published end of next year in a version 1.0, um, it's much easier for beginners. So when you start enterprise architecture, so take the toolkit and it might save you 4 or 5 years. I think that's the time you need when you start with this more bloated bodies of knowledge until you know what to do. It takes 5 years at least, right? And we want to shorten this time, so it should be possible for novice for beginners to learn it much faster and to learn from the patterns and the experience of the seasoned people, right?
Yeah, I think was your inspiration from a similar book on architecture? I think there was a book called EAI Patterns, so Enterprise Architecture Integration Patterns. So was that your inspiration to name it like this? So
No, there's many books around
yeah, yeah.
patterns. So there was Christopher Alexander, and there's a Japanese professor, Takashi Iba. His whole career is about pattern languages. I think his work inspired us most. And that was also the reason why we wrote this Enterprise Design Patterns book this year, because we believe in the power of patterns, and we believe that this is the main creation we want to come up as a community. Yeah, collect them, and writing wisdom in form of very concise, condensed patterns is hard work. The book took us 200 percentages to write. It's only 120 pages. So this is really condensed. And we had 4 authors and 20 reviewers and so many discussions. And if you must write it down in a single page, how to do it exactly. Now express this in Word. And that's really tough. And we've learned a lot. And that's exactly the process we want to go.
Okay, to make it simple and to keep it, as you said, restricted to 200 pages requires 3 or 4 times the effort because
Exactly.
brevity is
Yeah, sure.
very difficult, actually speaking. So, which is what is the problem with probably some other frameworks. So, do you have a certification or something on this? And can people get certified on this
Um,
thinking process, or you buy a book and read it for
um,
yourself, go get the experience?
Not yet. The pattern book has been published in November, so I would say that's the foundation. I would say it's the foundation for a practice we call enterprise design now. And now we will take the next year, full year, to come up with in what we call intersection toolkit 1.0. And with the toolkit will be available as a free download, as a PDF. So it's true open source, but we will offer probably automated e-learning so that people can download a training, a video training, and pay for that. So that will be the way we want to make revenue with this sold trainings. And then from beginning 22, so in 1 year from now, we will start also certifications where people can download trainings and so on. So, but I would say that's 1 year of hard work with the community, and that will happen next year.
Yeah, I did see John Ross also, I think, on part of your advisory team. Gene Ross, I think, from MIT, who's there as a part of the advisory committee, and that kind of stuff. So when you say, um I think somewhere in your blog, I just read that you feel that in fact, it's Chris Potts' idea also, that he said that the CEO is the only true blue enterprise architect in a company. All the others are all followers who don't have an agenda. They have the time to, they don't have the power to make decisions. Only the CEO has that ability to make decisions and so on. And the rest of them, you probably call them as architecture facilitators or collaborators or something like that. How's been? So, do you have that kind of a emphasis within the architecture thinking group that emphasizes that architect should be more of a facilitator and team collaborator, bringing multiple divisions together and getting things done?
Yeah.
So,
I
how do
think
you?
in the current draft, we call this person Enterprise Design Guide. So we are not sure. Probably this will be the final name. So and means this guy must, of course, know the tools and know how to model this map and that, and he or she must know how to facilitate a workshop and so on. And he or she must know how to set up governance structures and to enable all the people. So for us, this enterprise design approach is a truly collaborative co-creation effort. So we invite many, many people that are already in the enterprise. So process managers, service designers, and software architects and executives, product managers, the people in the business line designing the products, for example. They are enterprise architects or enterprise designers, as we named them. So think of this role as a guide who knows the methods and has also the strong social skills to connect people, to talk to them, to invite them into what we call a negotiation space. So we see enterprise design not as a discipline, we would say it's a collaborative practice, and that's a difference. So we want to say, okay, you're an executive and you're a service designer, these roles will be there. But we together as a company practice enterprise design as a true co-creation, and that needs what we call the enterprise design guide. And yes, we are with Chris Potts with this Investing in Change. He's also an invited advising member. Chris, I'm really proud of that he will also support us. Is that at the end, we can only be successful when it is a natural part of strategic management. So at the end, we can only be successful when the C-suite, the boards, the heads of all the decisions made by executives are based on sound enterprise design maps. So it's a management instrument. Yeah? So at the end, we will provide tools that are tailored for executives. So and they must love them. And that's my experience. Whenever you bring it to the boardroom and you come with a simple creation where they can make decisions, when they feel they can make better informed decisions, then you are the hero. And that's what we must focus on, this target group.
Okay. So are you trying to say that there will be a shift in the designation from an enterprise architect to an enterprise business designer, so to say? So will they be called like that because of this kind of thinking, or because it's, as you said, they're going to be co-creators in the ecosystem? So are we going to see a role change like that, or it would be typically guys who are enterprise architects would play more of a business design role? How do you see that role change happening?
It will take some time for sure, because there are, I think, 50,000 people calling themselves enterprise architects on LinkedIn. I Googled that one. So there are many people and they are certified in TOGAF. And the discipline has been around for 4 decades. So it will be a slow shift. But if we are honest, people that call themselves enterprise architects have always been IT application portfolio managers. So no, I've never seen an enterprise architect architecting a product or an organization or a service. So how can we dare to call ourselves enterprise architect? That was never true. And so what we want to have, we want to, by bringing architecture to the business side, that means that architecture is a natural business discipline. So you can call it business design. We call it enterprise design. Enterprise design means you design business structures like products and capabilities. You design applications, but applications are also not an IT asset. So it's also business design. For us, everything is enterprise design, and there will be not that much IT. So by shifting this idea of architecture to the business, that's a natural thing that will happen. And yeah, and we would be happy, of course, to see more and more people certificate as an enterprise design guide in this notation. And we welcome enterprise architects that have the same frustration I had, yeah, because you're in an IT department, you almost never have the impact you should have, and you're always I've seen so many that were the librarians. So all they did, they had a repository of IT applications, and they tried to manage this repository of IT applications as best as they could, but they never really did business design. But we must shift it to there.
Okay, okay. I think you also talk about the fact that elevating business analysts to actually play the role that they have a tight grip on the business side of things. Typically, they just are requirements gathering guys, so they're relegated to that position. But if they were to really play their true blue game, then they could be business architects and be involved seriously in the business design aspect of it. So I think it's going to change the game for them as well, apart from just EAs and service designers, UI UX designers. So it's going to be.
For sure. I know many great business analysts. They call themselves business analysts, and they have all the skills you need as an enterprise design guide. All because you also must be able to facilitate a workshop, and they are really clever and analytical thinkers, and they know how to model process models and all kinds what's in the bar book. There's this body of knowledge for business analysts. So I think it's not a big change for business analysts. If you're good in business analysis, usually you gather requirements for a certain project or solution. Opening that and saying, oh, it's a bit about becoming enterprise aware. So I'm not thinking solution only. I also look enterprise aware, and that's a paradigm shift to make this way of thinking. Yeah, we are so addicted to products and product ownership. Yeah, it's everywhere. Yeah, so solutions and product, and but that there's not that much consolidation between these product lines, this all these product owners. And so from a methodology point of view, it's a simple shift. But it's a change in mindset, and I think it must start at the top of the company and in the culture, so that companies must be aware that they must become more enterprise aware. So Scott Ambler is also a part of our core team. He said that the culture of most companies lack enterprise. So it's part of the culture that you focus on solution, and you have the silos and the business units, solutions. The skills you need to design as a business analyst a solution are quite similar to what you need to design more on an enterprise level. That's the good news.
Yeah, yeah. So, how do you think this skill set is it by just learning this new framework that you put across? Is that going to help, or because business side, business guys, their goals are entirely different. Like you put X money, you want to get 10x. IT guys, like you want to write some good code, working code, featured code. But there's a lot of things, as you said, in between these two things that really wows the customer, and none of these guys address them individually. Like not the business guy, not the IT guy. So there is a whole 9 yards between these two guys. So how do you think these guys can actually acquire that knowledge? Are you trying to say that after a couple of years, the person has a maturity that he's seen enough of IT, enough of business, and he's more capable to play this kind of a role? So is it going to be like that, or is it going to be more of a practitioner based, as you said, put the patterns in picture and then get people through a role play? That how do you think people actually are going to gain this kind of an experience? Is it going to be done on the job, or like probably some kind of mentoring? And as you said, the architecture thinking group can help build this kind of a capability, because it will require a lot of skill set, learning, unlearning stuff.
I think we want to nudge them to look at more to nudge them to have a broader look of the enterprise. If you are, I would say, an IT guy or a business analyst working closer with the IT guys, then you typically look at IT applications, technology, data structures, processes, but processes from a quite operational, very down-to-earth level. So you have a zoom level that is very detailed, and you look at a certain solution only. So you have a narrow scope, but a quite deep scope. That's typical. Yeah. And I think with the toolkit, we also have a meta model there. And we have the concept is we want to nudge people and say, yes, you can design the solution, but if you look at this process from an operational point of view, and you come to the conclusion that the product doesn't make any sense, then please go to the product guys and nudge them and go to a workshop and discuss with them. So you should feel more accountable for a broader range of design elements. It's this awareness, and that's the reason why our meta model includes aspects that are not so common in the EA space, for example. So we have products and we have brands and we have organization as design objects. That's not used in Bespoke at all. You don't design an organization. I mean, how can you claim to do business architecture without designing or architecting the organization or the products and so on? That's in Bespoke, but not in the core. Yeah. So that means we must nudge the people to say, okay, you are a business analyst, you are used to design applications and processes and so on. Please contact the product guys and co-design the interface between the product and the solution. So it's about widening. I would say it's broaden your field of vision, broaden it, and we want people to nudge there. And our toolkit will support that. We will have certain views or perspectives, we call that, that are cross and more interdisciplinary.
Okay. So how do you explain the content meta model? Is it based on the organizational metaphors that the company can create it, and there is some kind of a default, guidance from the framework that your architectural thinking framework actually guides that here is the default set of things in the meta model as entities, and you can build upon this and make it richer to solve your own organization metaphors and things like that. So what has been your thought process on that?
What we want to offer are, we call this design scenarios. So we want to pick people where they are. So you're typically in a certain situation, you have a certain design challenge. Quite often it's an IT challenge, you do an IT consolidation. And then we say in our toolkit, we have a design challenge we call IT consolidation. And then we say, okay, please, if you have this design challenge, look at applications, capabilities, processes, information. So these are 4 elements in our meta model. So do what you've learned with that, but please, we want to nudge them. Please connect to the product and to the organizational guys to broaden this viewpoint. So our tools will pick people where they are. So we will define this design challenge. Another design challenge can be product redesign or uh, uh, look
legacy
yeah, or
migration, for instance.
user experience challenge, right? You look at the journeys and what do they mean. So you have a different starting point. You're much closer to the customer. Typically, the journey designers they stop when it comes to the enterprise architecture and so on. So we want to pick them where they are, have scenarios and stories, and tell the stories and help them to connect to capabilities. For example, we want the user experience designers to use and understand the concepts of capabilities which has emerged in the enterprise architecture community. And that way, we want to open concepts from one discipline and bring it to other disciplines.
Okay, so where does this leave with the architecture movement, which talks about a product owner as the central point of making decisions? Because various companies are at various levels of maturity. Like, you've got startups, you've got mid-range companies, you've got large enterprises, you've got enterprises across several geographies. So in such companies, like in a very small company, as you said, the main guy who's doing all the decisions could be the product owner in some companies like that. But in a large company, of course, there's a role of a business designer and an enterprise architect. So how have you factored this in the framework for to solve this kind of complexity?
Um, I'm a bit concerned with all this product ownership these days because also scaled agile framework, we know, yeah, there's everything is a product and so on. And that implicitly leads to this silo thinking. Yeah? If you follow only a product and so on, for me, this is a part of the problem. And what we want to do, we want to invite these products owners also to become enterprise to participate in this enterprise design co-creation. So I think that this product thinking and the whole business agility movement will also pass away. So for me, that's a fad. Yeah, I've not seen much of business agility in many companies. So I don't know many successful scale agile introductions, for example. So it will be in 1, 2, or 3 years. It will be people will see that it simply doesn't work if you focus only on product, 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 and then we won't be ready and say, okay, business agility doesn't come from product ownership and product thinking only. It doesn't, yeah, because you need to align that stuff. And now, please, let's complement all the frameworks you have in the agile world, so scaled agile framework or less or disciplined agile. Yeah, there's a lot of frameworks out there, and now let's complement them so that these frameworks deal mostly with how people work together, right? You go to this pipelining and you take your stickies, and then you have some interactions with other teams and so on. So all of these frameworks, they deal more with this, how do we collaborate? But if there's no business architecture in the room or no enterprise design maps, it's no wonder that the solutions are not aligned with each other. So I see our work that it will complement that, and it will be maybe a natural part also for a scaled agile training in 2 or 3 years, that the product owners that are certified scaled agile product owners or Scrum product owners or whatever, and it must become a natural part of the training. So we want to encourage the people that provide the agile frameworks that they also link to our trainings. And with Scott Embler, we have the father of disciplined agile. He's part of our core team, and we probably will come up with a quite deep integration between his disciplined agile and our intersection toolkit, because the one agile deals more with how people shall collaborate, teams, autonomy, scrums, and time boxing, and so that's how do we work. Yeah, and for me it's a perfectly it can be complemented quite easily with this enterprise design approach, and that's what we want to see. We want to have the people connect to us. We can't push scale agile to connect to our concepts. They don't, I mean, they, they do good without us, but it must be the challenge for us is it must be as good as sexy as an iPhone that everybody wants to connect to us. That's the moment we want to achieve.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, because there's a whole lot of disconnect between the agile world and the architecture or enterprise architecture world as it's there today. And unless this bridge is happening, and Scaled Agile is doing some amount of work to bridge that gap, but I'm sure that they're not fully done it anyways. And because there's a lot left to be done in that area, as you said. So if you can connect these two frameworks, I think then this two ways of thinking, so then I think that's going to solve a lot of problems. And it also depends on the maturity of the company, because some companies are very small and they don't even want to think like an enterprise. So they are quite okay calling a product owner as a product owner and getting stuff done. But when they have large complexities, maybe he elevates himself to a business designer and service designer, and that kind of stuff. So based on the organization maturity, I think the terminology undergoes a change. So has that been factored within your framework based on the size of the organization, that the way you apply your patterns, they change? I think one good point that you said was based on the situation that you are in, or the journey that you're in. Okay, if this is the problem, then apply this pattern. If this is a problem, then apply this pattern. So does that factor into account the complexity factors of all of these organizations, in the sizes, in terms of the size complexity, in terms of the process and organizational design complexity? So has that
Yeah.
also been there, Wolfgang?
Yeah, what we also will come up with are what we call kinds of enterprises. We think there are challenges. So one dimension how to define your enterprise design process is design challenge. So what is it what you want to design, a user experience, IT applications, and so on. And the second dimension is be aware about what kind of company are you in. Are you in a big company? Are you in a public sector? Or are you a startup? This affects the enterprise design process resources heavily. So, but we don't know enough to exactly know what this means. But at the end, all of our tools and all of our design patterns will take you from where are you, what is your story, are you designing UX or IT, for example, and are you a startup? Okay, in that case, we have design patterns A, B, and C. So these are the parameters, right? And what we also think is that this enterprise design, it could be quite easy to complement the scaled agile approaches. So I would say it's a loose coupled, it's a simple interface. So they can do Scrum and they can do scaled agile. So it's about how to work together. And the interface to the enterprise design world, it's complementary. There's no overlap. So the one side focuses on how to work together and on culture. Yeah, to be honest, that's what agile is all about. How do we work together better, autonomous, and about culture? And our thinking complements it with bringing enterprise to the room and offering concrete tools and patterns how to better align solutions.
Okay. So that's good. And what is how you have tackled this kind of a movement that the industry is moving from project-based setup to product-based setup? So people are, instead of managing things as projects and portfolios, they are managing now as mostly the product mindset thinking, just as the architecture mindset. So they are moving towards the product mindset. So how has that been factored as a pattern? So if
Yeah.
people are moving from projects to product.
Yeah. Right now, we don't have products as a pattern. I think we are keeping projects. So I'm not so happy with this movement towards this product thinking. So I think there's a lot of confusion with that because that, for me, this implements the silos. If you say you center around products, not around projects, you say, okay, we have product A, B, C, D, and there's not much of a connection between them. So I'm a bit, I would, if I, and I'm not sure if most of the company already are on the path to this product thinking. I see some, but I know maybe more companies that still have this classical multi-project management. Yeah? And we also have a connection with PMI. Scott Ambler is part of project management. And I don't see this classical project management disappear. I don't believe that. So that will be around. And for me, this product thinking, yes, you can do it. It has some disadvantages.
Yeah, yeah. So typically, the world over, a lot of companies are gravitating towards product mindset, which is turning the inverted triangle upside down and emergent architecture and that kind of stuff. You create an architecture without defining the scope. You discover the scope, like while you keep moving and things like that. So that is also there as one of the things that's happening. And I quite like your idea about the iPhone analogy that the whole framework should be as intuitive as an iPhone, which means your granny can use it and still know how to work because iPhones are very intuitive, and that's why Apple is the most valued company. So that's really good. So, so if somebody were to read the framework, are you saying it's going to be intuitive enough to find how to apply the knowledge all by themselves? And obviously, there'll be case studies and other things, and it'll be a vibrant group that will
I
going
think it
forward.
must. I think it must. And this metaphor with I admire Steve Jobs. Yeah, and he said you must start with the customer experience and must work backwards to the technology. That's exactly what Togaf did wrong, in my opinion. So it started with all the details, 900 pages, and it's ugly. And if you look at the user interface, so nobody can use that stuff. And we will do it other ways around. We want to say, okay, who is our target customer? At the beginning, our enterprise design toolkit might speak to one or two scenarios. We will talk to enterprise architects and we will tell a story and make the iPhone, the user experience, appealing to them. And probably at the same point of time, we will have some instruments, management instruments. We might publish it on Harvard Business Review or something like that. So we must speak to the executives and say, okay, executives, we have a really powerful tool for you. That's a capability map. We won't call it capability map probably, but that's the elephant or a model of a shared understanding. So we now have a discipline where we connect all your people in the enterprise to a shared understanding. And this map, please use this tool where you can connect strategic goals and investment decisions and all the money. So that's what the big guys are interested in. Yeah, give me a shared understanding of the capabilities and show me where are my goals and where are my fields of action, where shall I improve, and all of these discussions. So this is a different target audience, and we will work really hard to come up with a tool they love to use, and that means it must be really simple. So yes, we start with this customer experience, and we will exactly know who our customers of the version 1.0 is.
Okay. So how do you actually mix the design thinking part of it and the customer journey mapping within the framework? So is there a placeholder for finding out what really works with the market and what is the right market fit or the right market segment? Like, is there a placement for that within the framework?
Yeah, the good thing is with this association with the intersection group, so architectural thinking has been renamed to intersection group. We now have, I would say, 40% of the people are coming more from the designer side, means we have plenty of
Excuse me.
journey and user experience designers and so on. And you can do design thinking. What we prefer are using design sprints. So that's a different workshop format coming from Google and so on, coming from this design community. So they're quite differently. So I'm an IT guy, yeah, and when talking to these UX guys, that's still a bit alien to me. They are so close to the customers and they have so powerful research methodologies to understand the customer and its journey and his context and so on. They're really strong. And exactly that's what we want to have is we bring those people in to come up with a toolkit that seamlessly bridges their concepts. So that's not only journeys, there's a concept called top tasks by Gary McGovern. So that's really a strong concept, but it's not connected to business capabilities or internal processes. That's our world, right? We talk in information, application, process capabilities. That's where we are. And they are talking journeys, top tasks, interactions, touch points. And then that's the magic enterprise black box for them. And bridging these two worlds will be of enormous importance, yeah, to bring capabilities to the UX designers and vice versa, bring top tasks and a better understanding of the customer to people formerly known as enterprise architects. There's a lot of hidden treasures to be found.
Yeah, I think if you really have to succeed as a good business designer, you really have to understand what is the top task that the customer needs to do of the given list of things and what has to be the highest priority. I think that
Yep.
is quite a good thing. So, are you combining some elements of design thinking? Is it already there? The design thinking aspect of it in the framework already? Is it there already?
In the current draft, we focus on design sprints. So we have a phase. So I don't know if you know our logo. So it's like a loop, an infinite loop. And if you
Yeah, yeah.
go to the left side, we start with exploration. You explore the context. So you do some research to understand the concept. And then you go back in this loop, and then that's where the co-design happens. And in this co-design, you can do design thinking. You can do this double diamond and prototyping and so on. That's good, but it's not part of our framework, of course, because that's already there. But there's also quite a powerful concept. It's called design sprint, driven by
Yeah,
Google, coming from the
by
design.
Google. Yeah.
Yeah, and we will come up with a set of design sprints, types of categories of design sprints that are related to our maps. So that means there will be patterns that when you run a design sprint in a certain context for a certain design challenge, we give advice on which maps shall be created in this design sprints. It's not just go to the wall and draw whatever you want to the wall in this design sprints. We will say, okay, if you have this context, if you're at that certain point of time in that context, we provide, we would suggest to use this map. And that's the advice we want to give.
Okay, so there is a good amount of design sprints within the framework that Google. I think there's a famous author, Mike Knapp or something. Forgot his name. So he's written a book, the famous book on Google, how they use this in the Google Ventures, Google Garage,
Yeah.
that kind of
Yeah, but
approach.
we will reframe it more to enterprise design. So now these design sprints are for more specific design challenges, for user experiences, and more specific design objects. And for us, the design object is the whole enterprise. So we apply the concepts, this Google Design Sprints concept, and make it enable it to design complete enterprises. And it's also what we want to bring to the enterprise architecture community. Not many enterprise architects even know that concept of design sprints, right?
So when you say the top task part of it, are you referring to Jeffrey's work, the top task kind of a stuff based on his idea of which is the most important burning point that you need to solve for the
So
customer? Are you
we
referring to that?
refer to Gary McGovern. He's
Okay,
a guy from Ireland, and he's
okay.
written a book. He's done it hundreds of times, and he's also an advising member in our association. So, and that's the amazing thing is that we have the best names, the people who wrote the book, to co-create this approach. That's the only way to make it work. I'm not able to write the toolkit around journeys and top tasks. I'm not a user. I've never studied user experience design, but we have these people, and we bring them in, and we discuss the methodology, and I can connect Gary McGovern with Chris Potts, for example. And Chris Potts is more about the management aspects. Gary is more about the top task. And they can discuss what does this mean for a seamless toolkit. We want to have a coherent, seamless toolkit that connects top tasks with management decisions and capabilities. There are so many gems, there's so many treasures in this, hidden in these silos. And we want to open it and make it available for the other disciplines. Yeah.
So I think that's a huge challenge connecting. I think you yourself have referred to as connecting UX designers, service designers, business designers. All of these bodies of knowledge are in silos, and if you have to orchestrate something so that you are going to create something that aligns with the organization mission and vision, it's a huge challenge, and there's
Yeah.
no very straightforward answer for that. But I think you should start somewhere. If somebody's worrying about it, then yes, that's a good thing in that direction, because right now it's completely disconnected and there's no single straightforward answer for
Yeah.
doing that.
And it's astounding how ignorant the disciplines are with each other. So 2 years
Yeah.
ago, I read plenty of books of various disciplines. I started to read about org design and user experience design and process management and microservices. And if you do that, they are so ignorant. They don't know their concepts. So the domain-driven designers, I read a book about domain-driven design. They are ignorant. They don't understand business architecture. So this domain, for example, domain-driven design must be connected in a certain way to enterprise design, but they are not thinking that way. And the same is true for organizational design. They say, okay, how can we bring people together? But they don't understand that it's related to processes and IT applications. So these silos, for me, this was a big, big surprise. I didn't expect it. And so
Yeah.
that I think the only way to make this really work is to bring those disciplines together and co-create a toolkit that is being created interdisciplinary by this community. That's what we're gonna do here.
Okay. And how do you think this is going to address the concept of the larger governance that is going to be there? Because this requires a lot of governance across this. So governance is mostly on the when you have an enterprise architecture, you have governance. But I think it comes back to the thing that when you have organizations of various scales and complexities, how do you handle governance? I think Chris Potts has done something on that, but how do you tackle this governance challenge? Because it requires a good orchestration layer that needs to be who's going to be doing the facilitator's job, or who's going to be doing the thing. Because industry loves if you give them, okay, do this, these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 steps, you get qualified as this framework and this, then they quite like that. But I think there is no straightforward answer for that. But how do you think that should really happen? So is it the job of the business designer to play the role of an architecture come business design facilitator to get that thing done, or there should be a board who should be an architecture board who should actually have this mindset or this kind of
Yeah.
thinking?
I think
How's
it all starts with the enterprise awareness. So what we must achieve is, at a certain point of time, we must write a really well-known article in Harvard Business Review, and the big guys must read and understand that it's not only about agility and only about innovation. So if you read the journal that every executive in the world reads, the Harvard Business Review, what you read in each and every issue is design thinking, business agility, innovation, so blockchain maybe. So that's what they read all day long. There's no enterprise architecture, there's no enterprise inside. So and we believe that's where it must start. So we must address the C-suite and say, well, it's not only about products, it's about enterprise. Wow. And then if they understand, um, they must set up a role enterprise design guide. So that's a role, but enterprises must understand that it's a collaborative practice they must set up. And part of this practice is our governance structures. And we will come up with patterns how to set up governance structures. So in our model, we have boards. We for sure will have board decisions for big decisions, but we of course also want to empower autonomous teams. So, we want agility, it's a lot about empowerment, about making decisions at the level that is closest as possible to realization. But that's not enough. But I think, and we also have patterns how to connect them. We believe that these enterprise design maps can be the glue, the bridge between the more strategic decisions and the more operational decisions. If there is a certain shared understanding, that's the elephant in my talks. Yeah, if you have the shared understanding, you can make bigger strategic decisions by board. That changes the shape of the enterprise, of course, and you must be aware that you have many, many thousands of micro decisions, but they might also affect the shared understanding. So we want to invite all decision makers to this collaborative design and decision-making process. But for me, yeah, it's a clear yes, there will be boards forever. And enterprise design maps, like in Martin Mocker's and Jeannie Ross's Design for Digital book, it's also about this accountability frameworks. So how can we define who owns which part of the enterprise? Who's the owner of that information entity? Who's the owner of that application, of that process, and so on? So all of these architectural elements should have an owner and clear defined ownership. That's also what the book says. And so this ownership is also an important concept for us, right?
Okay. And so is it there as a part of your 35 design patterns that are already there, the governance patterns, or you are going to be including them?
We have three patterns that deal with management. Actually, we have one pattern that says executive buy-in. So it's in the early stages of the patterns is you must have buy-in by management. If you want to do enterprise design on your own and your business heads of business units don't know what you're doing, you can quit. You no need to go further. So you need to have this management buy-in. Then we have a pattern that is called clear ownership. So you must define for each part of your architecture, you must have a clear owner. That sounds obvious, but I haven't seen that often. So quite often it's unclear who's the owner of this information, who's the process ownership. I mean, this has been around for 30 years, but it's really tough to find process owners in a company, for example. So that's a pattern. And then we have a third pattern that is called management instruments. So means that we as an enterprise designers will provide PowerPoints, instruments, dashboards, if you want. So where you connect money and strategic goals on a single slide that you can go to the boardroom and you open this view on your enterprise design connected to money and goals typically, and you use this as management instrument. So in this book, we have three patterns that deal with this topic.
Okay. And one more thing, Wolfgang, you actually, I read in one of your blogs or I think one of your talks, you said that you don't quite like the idea of value streams. You rather prefer capability maps. Can you elaborate on that part? What is that?
Maybe that was a bit of a misunderstanding, but we will clarify that because we will write a paper on that in spring with some really good names, I think so.
Correct.
I think that they are the same almost. So I
Yeah,
think,
yeah.
and what will be in the
Exactly. So that was my point also. So why did you make that statement? Mm.
No, maybe a bit more confusion. I don't like the concept of value streams. I prefer processes instead, because I think having a metaphor that value is something that flows to an organization is flawed. Yeah, for me, what I always say is value is the result of the right product at the right cost customer in the right situation. So value is not that. That's wrong. That there's value that stacks up in a process. So for us, I'd like to talk about processes. And in the intersection toolkit, we have both elements. We have capabilities and we have processes. And both are there to create products, and both need people, IT, and physical objects. Both need resources. So the only thing is that the process has sequence. So if you think of these two things, it's the same, only process adds the sequence. And you can zoom into a certain capability. For example, you do payment processing in a bank. Yeah? Payment processing is for sure a capability of each retail bank, but there are processes that make this capability work. So you can zoom into this capability, and then you might have several processes. And the process can be seen as a sequence of capabilities on a micro level. So it's all about zooming in, zooming out, and adding sequence or removing sequence. That's our take on that. But we must reframe the concept of capabilities, because it's
Yeah.
quite flawed in bespoke in the talk. I like the talk of capability guide better, but there are some restrictions in the bespoke. We can't do that.
Correct, correct. Because if you abstract the processes at a higher level, then you can say those actually map to value streams, and value stream stages can be your steps in the process underlined, and then finally they map
Yeah,
onto capabilities and so on. That kind of stuff. So that yeah, it depends on what is the terminology that you use. It can
yeah,
create a lot of confusion if it's not talked about the right way. And one more point was, how do we handle this concept of, let us say that you said that once you design a business and you take it to market and see the market fit, if it doesn't really fit the market, how are you going to be pivoting that? So have you incorporated that pivoting part in the whole thing? Because a business designer would play with a lot of ideas, and then okay, after the iteration loop, the exploration, as you said, the inverted infinity thing. So once you go to the market and come back, and you need to revise your exploration loop. So how are you going to be adding that pivoting part in it? So the lean startup actually has this concept called pivoting. So if you fail at one idea, go get another one and try to
yeah.
make it better and
I'm
so
a
on.
big fan of this concept, yeah, because we see this loop. It starts with exploration, co-design, and it goes to realization. It can be done in at various speeds. So there are rhythms. So, and if you are in this pivoting phase, if you're a startup, you can go much faster, and you do an experiment. Then you change a bit in your simple product at the beginning. You might have a simple product, and you can change it every week if you want, because it's so simple. But if you are a big bank, it's not that easy to pivot that fast. So, and or if you do an IT merger, so the loop for us, it works for startups and for pivoting and for the lean startup scene. It's exactly the same. It's just that you have shorter phases, you have a shorter exploration, and you might have not, it's not that much work to implement the change in the product, because you don't have simple and startup products. So we think we must tackle both. It's just various what we call contexts. But it's the same loop, and it's the same approach. The tools can be used, our tools can be used for startups, and the loop can be done at a really high pace. Or you can, if you have a merger, if you ever done a merger of two big companies, you know that this loop takes years. It's much too slow. And the decisions in the center of the loop, we have this decision making. So there are bigger decisions, and you don't need to have daily decisions. You have maybe quarterly board meetings to make big, but the loop is the same and the tools are the same. That's our point.
Okay, that's fine. Um, and how do you think people can actually join this movement, the Architecture Thinking Association? So, do you have a membership, or
Yeah,
I mean, how is that possible?
we renamed it to Intersection Group recently in November. So it's Architectural Thinking Association is it's just a renaming. It's legally it's the same body. You can go to intersection.group. So the website will be launched after in the new year, and in January there will be, hopefully we will finish the website, And there are various kinds of memberships. So if you want to apply as an individual, as an expert, there is a form already where you can say, okay, I want to apply and I have certain expertise. So you can connect to us and participate as an individual and as an expert in a part of a work stream. So what we now have are groups of 5, 6, 7 people. Each of them have a stream lead and they discuss, for example, design sprints, or they discuss strategic governance topics, organizational design and cultural topics. So we have these focus groups around topics, and you can apply to become a member of that. Usually these are people with more than 10 years of experience. So we have awesome people in these groups. And yeah, and if you are a corporate, you can be an early adopter. So if you're an enterprise, a bank, for example, there is already enough stuff you can start with and we can support it. So that's the way where we want to make money. If you're a tool vendor, we already have three tool vendors that are interested to set up partnerships. At the end, they like the idea of enterprise design. This kind of partnership means that you pay a certain amount of money and we help you to innovate, and we will provide you with new concepts. So, and then I think what we sell and what we want to monetize are our world-class experts. So it's a bit like a multi-sided platform. We attracted a lot of really clever people now, and now we have this potential. And the next step is to make some money, and with this money, we want to pay people for creation of the content. So think of us as a multi-sided platform. We already have an amazing community of individuals, and we are searching for corporates that want to be an early adopter or a tool vendor who wants to run an experiment and work with us. So that's the ways.
Okay. So before one actually gets the formal certification, as you said, which might be the starting of 2022 or something, if somebody wants to get a hang of this framework, so they can read up the book, or is there a wiki or a blog or something? Where do people actually become early adopters? How do they do that?
Yeah, you can buy the book Enterprise Design Patterns. So I think the basic ideas are in there. The maps and the concrete tools are not in there yet, but the basic fundamental principles are already in there. So of course, it's a good idea to start with the book. And in January, you can go to intersection.group, and there you can find all the concepts. And I think we will have in January, February, probably many of the core concepts already on this new web page. There's still architecturalthinking.com. So these are the concepts coming more from the enterprise architecture space. But step by step, we will migrate it to intersection.group and better connect it with all the other designing disciplines.
Okay. And I think it's been great talking, Wolfgang, with you. Thanks for sharing your experience. But before we go, I just want you to give your thoughts on how should one actually aspire to become a good business designer? What are the books to read? Who are the people to follow? And what do you think should be the mindset of some such person who wants to, do this role quite well, like a business designer, a good
Yeah.
enterprise architect? So, what do you think are your life lessons that you would like to share to the community?
That's interesting. I think one lesson is it pays off to get out of his or her silo. So get out of your silo, become aware of the enterprise, and there are so many places where you can read books. So I probably also have a recommendation list of books, so you can read a lot of brand design and service design and enterprise architecture. But that you need to read a lot of books currently. So we would, of course, be happy if you follow us. We also have a blog and the email list, and you can participate on one of our Wednesday webinars. In each Wednesday, we will provide a 1 hour talk. There you can connect and you are on our mailing list. And we will publish also a list of books where you can do, and you can follow us on LinkedIn. So, and exactly, I think that's exactly the work we want to do with Intersection Group, is to have a place where people of various disciplines can connect to and read blog posts and read books. There are some awesome books out there. Design for Digital is one of my favorites, and there are so many. Um, yeah, and we
Okay,
invite.
design from digital. You meant the MIT one, the Jane
Yeah,
Ross one.
exactly. The Jeannie Ross book. That's an awesome book. It's more coming from the IT perspective, but I like this book a lot. There's a lots of good book from the brand design world. That there are so many out there. That's true.
Correct. Correct. Yeah. Okay. And what would be the mindset of somebody get out of the silos? So that would be the mindset basically of how one should play a broader thing. So what do you think that should be?
What I feel when I go to a typical enterprise, there's a sense of frustration, and I think that people already feel that the silo thinking leads nowhere. And if you talk to software architects, for example, they are frustrated because the legacy, the time it takes to integrate in all these legacies, they know that the IT architecture is totally out of control. And that's the reason why IT is so expensive. So you can feel the sense of frustration in each of the companies. So we invite all the people that are frustrated by knowing that point solutions need nowhere into a space where we think, okay, let's think enterprise. That's the change. Yeah, become enterprise aware and help others to become enterprise aware.
Okay. Yeah, I think. Thank you. Thanks, Wolfgang. So look forward to more from your group and your book, of course. So I'm sure there will be multiple revisions of that as you start incorporating a lot of things. So I do look forward to your movement, and I'll definitely keep a tab and follow you and the group, and try to join your group and see what we could do. I think that was a great share from your side. So I think it will definitely benefit a lot of budding business designers, enterprise architects. So thank you very much for your time, and have a great week ahead.
Thank you, and thanks for having me. Thanks for the invitation. It was nice talking to you.
Thanks. Thanks.